You know, when I was a kid, this old black and white movie called Johnny Tremaine kept running in my head. You ever have a song or a movie that just gets stuck in your head for no reason? Anyway, this scene where these British soldiers are walking through the streets of Boston and they be singing a little ditty about how they re-gonna hang the rebels, and then one of the rebels yells up to them, "Hey, you're gonna run out of rope pretty soon." And then the British soldier pulls out his sword and goes after him. But another guy steps in front of the sword and takes it for him. And then he gives this look to the crowd. And as the music swells, he takes the guy's head off with a single blow. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but what I really loved about that movie was the underlying message that even though there were only a handful of patriots willing to fight back against the tyranny of the British Empire, eventually the rest of the colonists would join the cause. Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook with a 30-day trial at audible.com/Ben. My channel has grown tremendously over the past few months, but the numbers don't really mean much if you aren't learning anything from these videos. So if you here to just have fun and learn a thing or two while you at it, hit that subscribe button. On December 16, 1773, tensions were high in Boston. For the past 2 years, the city had been under martial law and the British soldiers patrolled the streets at all hours. The day before, a group of merchants met with Governor Thomas Hutchinson to discuss their grievances. They wanted the hated coercive acts repealed. These acts were passed by Parliament in response to the Boston Massacre, which I covered in an earlier video, and they basically said that Massachusetts would be put under military control until things settled down. Well, Hutchinson told them to shove it, so they organized a protest for the next day. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, the British viewed any kind of public demonstration as a threat. And on top of that, the East India Company was having a terrible year. Their tea was piling up in warehouses because everyone had switched to other products in protest of their monopoly. But to solve this problem, Parliament passed a law that allowed the company to sell their tea directly to the colonies, cutting out middlemen merchants and undercutting prices. This move was very unpopular with colonial merchants who felt it threatened their way of life. And the most powerful merchants in Boston decided to make a stand. Samuel Adams and John Hancock were at the top of their game during this period. They had both helped organize the Sons of Liberty and had been involved in every major act of defiance against the British since the repeal of the Stamp Act. After the merchants' meeting, they sent out a call to arms, warning that the British were planning to use force to confiscate colonial weapons. In response, Samuel Adams and John Hancock rallied their supporters and prepared for a fight. They knew that the British troops wouldn't allow them to peacefully protest the Tea Act, so they came up with a different plan. Across the harbour in Charlestown, British soldiers guarded the ships carrying East India Company tea. So late in the afternoon, Samuel Adams and several men rowed across the harbour to view the situation. It was hopeless. There were too many soldiers and they were too well armed. So Adams and his crew rowed back to Boston and waited. Around 200 men eventually made their way to the docks where 3 ships lay anchored. At around 10 p.m., dressed as Mohawk Indians, they snuck onto the ships and dumped 92,000 pounds of tea into the harbour. Now, this event went down in history as the Boston Tea Party, but at the time, not everyone thought it was such a hot idea. Some people thought it was reckless and dangerous. Others felt that it didn't go far enough. But regardless of what anyone else thought, the die was cast. As far as Samuel Adams was concerned, there was no turning back. In the aftermath, the British responded with more repressive measures, closing the port of Boston until the tea was paid for. But the colonies were galvanized and ready to fight. Within a year, the American Revolutionary War would begin. If you like this kind of content, check out my podcast, where I publish the same episodes. Also hit that subscribe button.